Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this enlightening panel discussion on building real-world asset tokenization on the XRP ledger. Before we dive in, let me introduce myself. I'm Anshul Malhotra, head of RippleX Research. And with me today, I have the pleasure of hosting two visionary leaders who've been at the forefront of this movement. From Homecoin, we have CEO and co-founder Carl Jacob, who is venturing into the vast domain of real estate tokenization, unlocking opportunities and innovations for home buyers, investors, and everyone in between. On the other hand, contrary to traditional marketplaces, Thalo, a unique carbon credits infrastructure provider with an innovative approach that aims to provide transparent, efficient, and scalable solutions to counterbalance global emissions using blockchain technology. We are pleased to have Ryan Gledhill, co-founder and CEO.
Pleasure.
So today we aim to uncover their journeys, get their insights, challenges, and aspirations as they shape the future of RWAs on the XRP ledger. So without further ado, let's set the stage for a compelling exchange of ideas. Let's kick off with some introductions. Ryan?
Yeah, pleasure to be here, guys. I've been building enterprise-level software for about 15 years, about 8 of that since 2015 in Web3, which I think makes me almost as old as XRPL. I've been building some of the biggest RWA pools in the space. In fact, maybe still the biggest RWA pool in the space. It's a $1.2 billion treasury bond pool with MakerDAO for a protocol called Monetalis. I think that still accounts for about 55 to 60% of all revenue that goes through MakerDAO. And I'm really excited to be here, and I hope to be able to bring the same amount of capital to the XRP ledger.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm Carl Jacob. I'm from LoanSnap and Homecoin. We play in the $13 trillion mortgage industry. Our goal here is to really bring as much of that industry to the chain as possible. And there's a whole bunch of opportunity in that space because it is a very old school, very large market that moves really slow.
Awesome. Thank you. So before we go ahead, let's establish a common understanding. So when we mention the term tokenization of real-world assets, or RWAs, what are we really referring to? At its core, this process is about representing tangible assets, from stocks, bonds, and precious metals to real estate, investment funds, and other financial instruments as digital tokens on blockchain ledgers. So this transition into digital world means that these assets, and this is really fascinating, are now accessible for trading around the clock every day of the year. And this is what is revolutionary. That's because it has implications, vast and transformative implications, reshaping how we think about ownership, how we think about trading, and how we think about investment. So, taking our first steps into this landscape, let's start with the real estate sector, which is familiar to many of us. So Carl, could you describe to our audience what exactly Homecoin does and the emerging trends that you are noticing in tokenizing this real estate and mortgages?
You bet. So the simple thing that Homecoin does is bring this huge $13 trillion market in the United States to the rest of the world. If you look at mortgage, it is something that powers the banking system, the financial system. The US government holds about $3 trillion of mortgages on their balance sheet. And so effectively you get a lien, a collateralized loan against a home, and then the cash flows from those payments that come back. That powers a lot of things in the world, but most importantly, probably the money in your savings account getting a return. Unfortunately, in the TradFi world, that return goes mostly to the banks. And what we did was move that to the chain, which allows anybody in the world to invest in that same asset class and get the lion's share of the returns. And that is unusual on the investor side. On the consumer side, it means you can go from getting a loan in 60 days to 48 hours, which is transformative when it comes to a consumer.
I think that's a great project. So one very intriguing advantage of tokenization is the prospect of fractionalizing it. So, Carl, how does Homecoin champion this idea, if at all, particularly in real estate?
We took a really different approach, right? Because I think a lot of people think about fractionalization as like, how do you fractionalize the actual object itself or ownership in that object? In the US, the lien system has been around for a really long time. And so if you try to break that up, that's going to run into regulatory issues. So what we did was rather pool those liens together into a group of loans and then allow people to fractionalize their interest in that, which is a little different than others where they're trying to actually take the object and split it up into multiple different pieces.
That's an interesting angle.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the goal of RWAs is you have to have 1 foot in the real world and 1 foot in the blockchain world at first. I want everything to come to the chain. I think everybody else does too, but it's a $13 trillion industry. It's not going to do it overnight.
I agree with that, and I think the fractionalization across many different types of real-world assets is going to be crucial. I think in terms of investing, current assets that are outpriced, standard people can then invest in some of these projects that you can then fractionalize into pricing that is suitable. And I think for carbon credits, it's even more useful. Some of you might have heard of Stripe Frontier. Now, Stripe Frontier do really high-quality carbon dioxide removal credits. Some of those can sell for $550 a ton. So when, and this is something that Valo's building, if you're integrating an offsetting widget into, let's say, an e-commerce basket, so you can buy your product, you can offset the creation of that product and the delivery of that product. That doesn't work without fractionalization, because if you have to buy a whole ton, as you've had to so far in the carbon credit industry, you're paying $50 for a pair of sneakers and then $550 to offset it. And it just doesn't make sense, right? So that fractionalization is going to become crucial as we move forward.
Yeah.
Thank you both for your insights. Well, it's very evident from this that real estate is undergoing significant shifts with the advent of tokenization. You already touched upon it a little bit, Ryan, but now we're going to transition from the tangible to the intangible, and carbon credits is one thing. So for the uninitiated, Ryan, could you provide an aerial view on carbon credits and their financial importance in achieving our climate objectives?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at industry, they obviously create emissions by the products that they create. That could be energy, it could be oil and gas, it could be airlines, it could be whoever. Now, if you've got a gas-powered fleet, so a fleet of vehicles that use gas, one way to decarbonize is to turn that gas-powered fleet into an electric-powered fleet. But often, there's a delta between the total amount of emissions that you're creating and the amount that you can feasibly and realistically decarbonize at this point. That delta that we see in between both of those is where carbon credits come into play. We call them offsets, and it essentially just means you can offset to then move towards something that you might have heard, which is carbon neutral. So it's in fact, let's use an example. Carl, imagine you're a farmer in the global south. You're you're a Brazilian farmer, let's say.
I grew up on a farm. So.
Nice. So you'd be good at it. So what you could do, and what we've seen certainly over the last 20 years, is that you cut down the existing trees, the native trees that live there, and then you plant palm trees for palm oil and things like that. Because you're in the global south, you're probably not as wealthy as those in the global north. You need to feed your family. It makes total sense. However, the carbon credit market has now created an alternative to that. And for those of you that understand the carbon credit market, I apologize for butchering it and simplifying it so much. But instead of cutting down those trees, you can be paid carbon credits to the value of the carbon that would have otherwise been emitted. So it's interesting how you can now move from supporting and not taking carbon out of the air and leaving these trees and then selling them on. So you might be able to sell those to an airline, for example. So if I'm an airline, there's that delta that I previously talked about. I can use your carbon credits to retire and then offset against my emissions there.
It's really cool. It's the lien system in the United States was actually built around this idea of giving people money for the value that they invested in the land, and so very similar.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for explaining it really well to our audience. I hope it's pretty clear now. So my next question. So emphasis on sustainability has, brought innovative trends to the foray. Ryan, again for you. What trends in carbon credit tokenization are you witnessing, and how do you think they're shaping the future?
It's a great question. I don't know if we've got Clay in the audience here, but some of you might have heard of Centigrade recently launched. What we've seen in the market, in the carbon credit market so far, is that like any market, there are different quality projects that exist in that market. How do we combat that? Well, we combat that with the right data. We combat that by using ratings agencies. So there's companies that are setting up as the Moody's of carbon credits, labeling something as a AAA project when it's really high quality. Centigrade is building on XRPL at the moment to provide that data, to provide the data that we can then use to sell those credits and to give the best purchasing journey to that demand-side buyer. And I think that's really crucial as we move forward, is to have as much data as possible in the market, because the more data you have, the more you can push back against these Guardian articles that try and label all carbon credits as useless. There are clearly useful carbon projects that provide clean water to those in the global south, for example, and that are planting trees, and there are a number of different carbon projects that are super high quality.
Thanks. Getting to the technical side. So like in any innovation, I assume there are technical challenges that come with tokenizing carbon credits specifically. Can you highlight some of the primary hurdles that developers face, especially concerning interoperability?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anybody knows the carbon market, they'll know that some of the standards agencies that exist, I mean, it's a bit of an alphabet soup at the moment. You've got the ICVCM, you've got the VCMI, you've got various different standards agencies. And in order to build an interoperable system, you then need to build towards these different standards. Now, this is something that XRPL is perfect for, because you can build a pointer towards essentially an NFT that exists on XRPL that you can then point to with more fungible credits that are towards these standards. So if you're a registry that will only support one or two standards, and you're building something like Thallo, which is essentially an aggregation of credits across the market, then you need to be able to support all of these standards. So it's super useful to have an interoperable chain like XRPL.
So, did you mention that NFTs, they could be used for facilitating this interoperability?
More than art.
Sorry?
You can use them for more than art.
Yeah, mortgages.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is, you should also read the DID proposal, by the way. That's another way of supporting interoperability between these different
Absolutely.
tokens. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, these NFTs are super important, because you need to be able to point back to the underlying projects. So when you're purchasing the end credits that exist that are essentially fungible within those within that project, you need to be able to point back to the data that exists, hopefully on Centigrade. And Clay, I'm sure you're out there somewhere. And be able to verify the audit and all of the information that has existed on chain.
It's a good theme, I think, for this, which is transparency.
Yeah.
If you look at back in 2008, everybody's heard about the U.S. mortgage crisis. That was a crisis of transparency. You had these credit agencies, Moody's is one of them, where they had rated all these mortgages as AAA. Now, if anybody had looked like the guy did in Big Short, underneath there was a lot of mortgages that were not AAA. Right? Had they been on the chain, anybody would have been able to look and see that.
That's the benefit of blockchain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So one of the most pivotal decisions, I guess, for any developer or institution is selecting the right platform. And you guys have already talked a little bit about why XRP Ledger, but I would like to hear more. Like, why did you choose XRP Ledger when there are other different multitude of platforms available? Carl, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for us, it was pretty easy. Speed is one, right? That's always going to come up. In our world, getting money to our customers so that they can pay their bills and pay off their debts is super important. Security's really big deal in a $13 trillion industry. And there's been a lot of talk about smart contracts, and I think they're really, really valuable. But we've also seen the Achilles heel of blockchains, right? Which is this ability for anybody to do anything programmatically. And I love the approach of XRPL in the sense that it's like they're very important, but not more important than the security of the assets that are on the chain. And then the last is kind of a funny one. It's money, right? And flows and volumes. And a friend of mine is a restaurateur, Michael Mina, and he talks a lot about location, location, location. And you can have the best restaurant in the world, but if you put it somewhere where nobody walks by, you only get a certain number of customers that are going to come in. Whereas if you put it in a busy area, like the town square, you're going to get a lot of people who come by. XRPL is that, right? There's a lot of transactions. There's a lot of volume moving through the network. And for us, there's a lot of places that people have moments where like, I would like to make a return on my money that's safe. And that's what we provide. And that's why mortgages are used by banks and governments. It's a safe place to park your money for a time period. And you have to have lots of money moving through that structure in order to take advantage of that.
Absolutely, I don't think that's funny. That's capitalizing the volumes, right?
Right,
So
exactly.
Why not? How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, so I've mentioned it already. I think the audit trail, the ability that simply doesn't exist in the status quo in the carbon credit market at the moment, the ability to look back to the exact latitude and longitude of where this project existed in the first place, who verified it, which ratings agencies looked at it, so on and so forth. So that's super important. But I think something more important than that is you guys, right? You're the builders, you're the entities that exist in the space, and a lot of you are working for capital markets companies. Certainly Ripple is capital markets facing in a lot of its products. And that's super important. The real-world asset market is driven by T-bonds, by mortgages, by things like that. And these are huge markets. I think you said 13 trillion?
Trillion, just in the US. Yeah.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
So, so a $13 trillion market. And Ripple undoubtedly has the biggest touch point with these capital market players. And that's why XRPL is so important for this market.
Thanks. So,
Nice. Nice.
all right. So, from an operational standpoint, how would you describe your experience building on the XRP Ledger? Carl?
I mean, it's been great. I mean,
Are you a developer, though?
Well, I was. My CTO would say, don't let him touch the code. So I will experiment around. I think that it was a really easy transition for us. I mean, the project, we've already financed, tens of millions of dollars of homes. There's a lot of money that's flowing through the system. And it was kind of a big, like, oh my gosh, this is a whole new chain. How are we going to think about this? Honestly, the team that worked with us, coupled with the fact that it was just built the right way. I mean, it's one of those things where I was on the Java team early on, and when you build a product that is built for people to build things on top of by people who really know how to do it, it makes that transition much easier, and that's what the team found. It actually went faster than we thought it would, and a lot of things just kind of came out of it, and we love the future, the vision, right? I mean, we were talking about this earlier, but the AMM, something that we would have had to do ourselves on another blockchain, and honestly, we probably would have done it not as well as you all, is core infrastructure, right? It's part of the services provided, which is one of the things that we need in the mortgage market, because it's a gigantic, very varied market with a lot of, spreadsheets being emailed back and forth, which we hope to replace with an AMM one day.
That's great. So, how about you, Carl?
Yeah, so I've always been a terrible developer. That's the reason that I moved into the kind of product-facing type role. But we did build on an EVM ecosystem for a long time. I've been building on an EVM system since 2015. And there's an approach there which is, here's your smart contract, go and build it. And by the way, it's your job to test it and secure it. And we've all seen the results of that. And I think XRPL takes almost like an Android to Apple approach. And maybe that's a terrible comparison. But Apple locked everything down, and therefore you could trust that app store. And I think that's an important part of what XRPL has done with the API-type system that they've built. And I'm super excited to see the hooks that are coming soon as well.
No, I'm very glad to hear that. I'm going to poke you a little bit more. Were there any specific features or capabilities that stood out or posed any challenges?
Well, if Alan was here, he'd probably have a list. But I think what was interesting was that was a long list when we started. And what we found was that in many cases, the decision that was made was the right decision for us, in the sense that smart contract is a good example, NFTs is another. If it wasn't part of what we were being presented with, it was on the roadmap, and you all delivered, right? And that was really neat to see. It's like working with a partner, we're like, we've thought about this, we've seen the requests from developers, we've listened to them, and these are the things we're putting in. So I think that for us, for instance, one of the things that we ran into was we have a bunch of smart contracts on another chain, right? And it's like, well, how are we going to do this without those? Well, the answer is a lot of the functionality that you're looking for in those smart contracts is already there. Just take advantage of it, which was really great.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I think for me, I built an institutional stablecoin, and we worked with BlackRock, US Bank, Bank of New York Mellon, and Bank of New York Mellon is super important there. They're a custody provider. And I think if you're going to be a custody provider in this space, whether it's for mortgages, whether it's for carbon credits, these are big markets with big players. And what we really need there is wallets that have multi-party computation capabilities and things like that. We need to be able to emulate their off-chain four-eyes checks and things like that with on-chain, with an on-chain setup. And I know Ripple has recently acquired Metaco, so that, that's a big play there. That's a big step forward there. But I think if we're going to ask people to transact potentially hundreds of millions of dollars on-chain in a single transaction, then we need some level of protection and support with that custody.
Yeah.
Awesome. So again, Ryan, given the uniqueness of carbon credit markets, do you think, if at all, building on the XRP ledger has influenced the efficiency and functionality of your Thalos offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you look to fractionalize credits, then you need to do that super quickly. We've talked about the speed on the ledger already. That's super important for what we hope will be a hyper-functioning market with a lot of velocity. So yes, absolutely, and having the right introductions to the right capital market players. There are a lot of banks and financial institutions that already by default support XRPL or understand XRPL and the benefits it can offer. So I think that is and will be super important to us.
So it's both the features as well as the ecosystem that the XRP
yeah,
ledger
both
has
super
available.
important. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So as we draw our discussion to a close, I'd like to leave our audience now with some food for thought. Given everything we have discussed and learned today, let's shift our gaze to the horizon. Gazing into the future, and I'm being a visionary here right now, gazing into the future, how do you all envision the next 5 or 10 years of real-world asset tokenization across sectors? This is for everyone here, and I would like to hear your predictions and the challenges that you think this real-world asset tokenization is going to face in the coming 5 years.
So my predictions have been known to be terrible in the past, so bear that in mind. But actually, because they're so terrible, I'm going to use Boston Consulting Group and their predictions. By 2030, they say that this will be a $16 trillion market, which is 42 times bigger than the existing DeFi TVL today. Yes, we're in a bear market, but those are still huge numbers, right? So, and that's within 7 years. So I think we're going to, in order to be able to get to that stage, regulation is super important. It's a dirty word. None of us like hearing it. But it's also what will bring huge amounts of capital into these markets. Obviously, on the mortgage side, there's a lot of those regulations that already exist. On the carbon credit side, where certainly on the voluntary carbon credit side, we're slightly more fortunate that they haven't turned the eye of Sauron to us just yet. However, it will come, and we need to be ready for that. And I think building on a secure ecosystem like XRPL is going to be critical to that. So we should keep an eye out for regulation and be ready for huge amounts of capital to enter the space.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, 5 years is a long time. Couple different things. I think we'll move over half of the $13 trillion mortgage market in the United States to the chain easily. I think that, well, I don't think, I know, so to speak, that over 50% of people will pay their mortgage from their wallet. You think about the way we pay our mortgage today, and you can imagine streaming your payments. I mean, the fact that you would just happen to be out of town or whatever and just automatically gets paid would be great for most people. And I think probably one of the more interesting things that we think about is I think it will become a global marketplace. It won't be the purview of big banks and big PE funds anymore. And that would have helped a lot during some of the crises that have happened in the past. We've talked about that. Like 2008, there was plenty of money outside the United States that would have flowed into that market that just couldn't move fast enough. And I think as part of that, I'll give you one more, which is I actually think what we're doing here will influence the TradFi world. The product that we just built last year and we're now selling to these large financial institutions is called Smart Loans. It's a second lien product. We invented that on the blockchain. We built that on the blockchain. We were funding mortgages in 48 hours. And that is now a product that TradFi is taking. It's not 48 hours, but it's still a great product. So I think we'll see that influence over the next 5 years.
Awesome. That's great. Well, okay. Thank you both for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you.